Hi, Gerhard Bloom here, once again looking at the tyranny and the delusions of the social justice movement. So, in intelligence circles, we often talk about low probability, high impact events, right? And with respect to COVID, um, children getting COVID, it's a high probability, low impact event in the vast majority of cases, right? Kids are virtually bulletproof to COVID, right? It's nothing for them. In fact, the flu, much more serious to kids. Very early on, the medical science community understood that this COVID disease was not an equal opportunist, right? The major risk factors, obesity, agedness, underlying respiratory illnesses, you know, serious underlying conditions, and being quite aged, right? For kids, vanishingly small numbers of kids became seriously sick or died. In fact, in the United States, my understanding is about 700 children died from COVID. And this is if you believe the reporting, right? Because medical facilities, hospitals had every reason to lie and distort the numbers, right? And we've seen elsewhere that hospitals were reporting deaths with COVID as deaths from COVID. So there's every reason to believe that these 700 children who died allegedly from COVID, a large percentage of which may have died with COVID, which is it's a distinction that's important to note. So, what the media has told you right from the beginning has been an absolute lie. You were told that the lockdowns were necessary to stop the spread, and that we needed to wear masks, and that the vaccines, you get a vaccine, well, that will stop the spread, right? Well, the vaccines didn't stop the spread. It wasn't an epidemic of the unvaccinated. Anthony Fauci recently got COVID. Joe Biden got COVID. Our deluded idiot Prime Minister Justin Trudeau got COVID, right? So absolute nonsense. Wasn't the epidemic of the unvaccinated. And the cloth masks are useless, right? And I still see people trotting around with those stupid face diapers on. It's absolutely ridiculous. At any rate, in a rare moment of courage and honesty, John Hopkins University several months ago published a report, right? They looked at the data and they discovered, surprise to surprise, lockdowns had little to no effect on mortality, but had devastating effects on the economy, right? Little to no effects on mortality, huge catastrophic consequences for the economy. And the devastating effects weren't just limited to the economy, right? Suicide went up, rates of anxiety, depression, businesses brought to absolute ruin, people's lives bankrupted. It was absolutely unnecessary. And now, and what's the relationship between this COVID nonsense and leftists? Leftists love to control you. They're the experts. They want you to conform, and they're disastrously wrong on virtually every occasion. So the good news we have now is that vaccines have been approved in the United States for children, babies, 6 months of age and up. This is absolutely catastrophic. Let me tell you a story. When I was very young, about 10 years old, summer holidays, my parents would drop me off at the city pool and I would go swimming. And one day I saw a teenager who had, and this is no exaggeration, little chicken arms instead of arms on his shoulders, right? Little tiny chicken arms. And later I asked my mother about this. She said, oh, must be a thalidomide baby. Thalidomide baby. In case you didn't know, thalidomide was a medication prescribed for morning sickness to expectant mothers. Now, how well did it work? Oh, I imagine it worked quite well, right? Worked quite well. The only problem was these catastrophic birth defects. Catastrophic birth defects. And parents are now... I was listening to a media report. Parents in Maine were lining outside a clinic with their young children, infants, and couldn't wait to give their child this experimental vaccine, right? Remember when I said high impact, low probability, and we just don't know what the probabilities are. When we start injecting little babies with a vaccine, they are immune, a vaccine for a disease that they are like little supermen from, right? This COVID is absolutely nothing to them, and you're gonna give them an experimental medication. And these proud parents were telling you, or the media representative, that how glad they are because they've been locked down. They've locked down their kids for over 2 years because of this COVID nonsense. Now, in life is about trade-offs. And if you think locking down your child for 2.5 years to protect them from a virus that represents virtually no threat from has no cost, you are absolutely deluded. Rates of suicidality in children have gone drastically up. Rates of depression, anxiety, it's cancerous. And it's absolutely indefensible how parents could treat this abuse of their children as somehow protecting them. Oh, they're little Fabergé eggs. We have to keep them safe. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to get out of the way. There was an excellent book written well before this COVID nonsense. Jonathan Haidt, Greg Lukianoff, The Coddling of the American Mind. Right? They were looking at these rates of depression, suicidality, anxiety rates, and drastically up over the years. And it is this pampering and coddling of parents towards their children. And these safe spaces in schools where you can't challenge ridiculous ideas, and because these fragile egos are just too sensitive to accept it, and it's having catastrophic consequences. These kids lack resilience, they lack confidence, they lack interpersonal skills. When I was a kid, I would go on the playground, play with my buddies, unsupervised play. And occasionally there were fights. And if it got out of hand, kids would intervene, and that was that. But there was something to be said. There was something spine-stiffening about getting into a playground fight, right? I was in the gym several years back. I'm approaching my locker, and I see this guy walking towards and about to place a lock right beside mine. And I look around me, there's all sorts of free available lockers that don't have a lock beside them, which means you can park yourself there and, have some space to breathe. So I say to this guy, excuse me, you see that there's a lock there, right? He says, yeah, so? And I said, well, I'm there. There's all sorts of free real estate available. Why don't you grab one of those? He says, I was here first. Like, are you deluded? This is what I said. Are you deluded? I was there first. There's my lock there. So as we're exiting the changing room, this clown grabs my shirt and says, we're going to the front. I tell him, get your hands off me or I'll be wearing your teeth as a necklace. And I'm not going anywhere with you. So, well, I use more colorful terms, but basically bugger off, right? This is a young man who doesn't know how to handle interpersonal conflicts. he thinks he's going to drag me to the principal's office. This whining, sniveling nonsense, this squealing, this happens in universities, it's happening in the corporate world, right? You have some kind of interpersonal conflict with a fellow employee, and instead of discussing the matter as adults, one of you runs to the HR department and launches some poisonous allegation, obviously involving racism or sexism or one of these other isms, right? This kind of disastrous nonsense has to stop. And parents coddling their children is doing them catastrophic harm. Parents putting face masks on their children, right? And I still see this. Scientists have known, long understood, there's something called a theory of mind in the human being, right? We actually read minds. How do we read minds? We hear voice intonations, we watch facial expressions, and I can gain a sense of what your intentions are by watching you and listening carefully to you. I get a sense of what you're thinking, what your meaning is. Now, young children are developing this theory of mind. It's a skill, it's a talent. And covering young children, I've seen little toddlers who are learning to speak and learning to read facial expressions with masks on. And this is parents helping their children? No. This is parents hurting their children. Of course, with the best of intentions, right? At any rate, these parents, are taking a risk with their child. And as I say, it could be very high impact, and we just don't know what the probabilities are. And it is a fact that people have suffered catastrophic consequences from the vaccine, up to and including death. Yes, people have died. And the dust has certainly not settled on where the numbers are and how dangerous this are, these vaccines are. Now, in balancing risk versus gains, if you are in one of those high-risk categories, I believe that it was probably a prudent thing for you to get a vaccine and a booster. Getting 4 vaccinations, I don't believe the circumstances justify that, but that's a risk you will have to calculate for yourself. And unfortunately, the medical community and the scientific community is lying. It is lying. And I've mentioned this before. It is absolutely catastrophic that we cannot trust the medical community and the scientific community to be honest with us. When they will tell you that that man with the dick is a woman, you know they're lying. And when they will lie to you about something as obviously untrue as that, what else aren't they telling you the truth about? And in this case, approving a vaccine for children as young as 6 years old is just utterly morally repugnant. Morally repugnant. I don't talk about this issue in my book, Deconstructing Social Justice. But I do talk about a number of other very serious, important issues, and I hope you will check it out. It's not important because I wrote it. I wrote it because the issues are important. Thank you so much for your time.